Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there. Greetings and welcome to another Guitar Smarts podcast. We are 20 shows into this new podcast adventure, and this week we are taking our pick of some of the highlights from the first 20 shows. If you are not familiar with this podcast, then this is a great one to listen to. We have snippets from a range of our episodes, including the introduction episode, the Desert Island Gear Challenge, Guitar Care 101, guitar practice and music theory, and our guest conversations with Andy Rudd, Damien Lodrick, Matthew Lake, and also Matt Long. If you like what you hear, go back and have a listen. And if you have been with us all along, then thanks so much again for listening. And remember to go back and give some of those older episodes another listen. Tell us what you've enjoyed so far. Tell us what you think you would like to hear in the future. And if you have any questions for us, you can send your questions and comments over to our social media pages. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/guitarsmarts. And we're on Instagram as well. Our handle there is @guitar_smarts. Like and subscribe to us on your favourite podcast app so you don't miss a future show. And once again, thanks for listening. Here's to the next 20 episodes. That's enough waffling from me. Let's get to it. Well, let's make a start.
All right, mate.
Let's introduce ourselves, I guess, for the first time.
Yeah, so we should give an intro of who we are, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Why we like talking about guitars all the time.
Who are we?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'll make a start. So I'm Matt. And I've made a note here to specifically say that I'm a non-professional guitarist, not an amateur guitarist. I think there's a distinction between the two. I'm a non-professional guitarist. I've been playing for about 25 years. And I'd never really had a real intention to be a professional guitarist anyway. There was a period of time in my 20s when I thought, I'm going to go and study music and become a professional guitarist, but I realised it wasn't for me. I didn't want to do it. I enjoyed it too much to want to make a job out of it, So that's, I've been playing for about 25 years. What inspired me to play? So the first thing I saw, which fascinated me about a guitar, was in my dad's record collection. He had the Eric Clapton Slow Hand album, which it's just a picture of Blackie, the Strat, I thought, that looks incredibly cool. What is it? It's a guitar. And then that was around the time that Unplugged came out. So Clapton Unplugged and then From the Cradle were the two albums that made me want to play guitar. And that says a lot about my inspiration, I guess, as a guitarist and what kind of, how I like to play and what are things I reference when I'm thinking about playing guitar. But since then, 25 years later, my influences are much more eclectic than that. I love a lot of different types of music, a lot of different styles, genres, ages, old and new. And I guess this, for me, is about having those conversations about music and about guitars and about equipment and everything that you want to geek about and talk about. And that's me, I guess.
I'm going to ask you more about that in a minute because I think you're being modest. You've been very modest, and having played and gigged with you for a number of years, there's a lot more underneath that modest statement that you said, and I know, having spent many a year gigging with you, but then also chatting to you, as we set up or between sets and things, that this is a real passion for you, and your knowledge of the subject is great, and you've got a really nicely rounded view of what it means to be a performing musician, as well as a good sensibility and very good technical knowledge about gear and things, and we're going to get into all of that at some point for sure. I mean, for me, similar, right? So I've been playing for 25, 26 years. And I think it started for me as something where at school you had to pick an instrument. And so for me, that one seemed to be the coolest. So I just chose it on that ground, and nothing else. And then realized quite quickly that it was going to take some effort and some hard work to try and play the kind of things that I'd grown up listening to. Right, my house was filled with music growing up from my parents. Although this wasn't the reason that I wanted to play guitar. It was just I had to pick an instrument. It wasn't until later years that I developed my own music taste. But and then, I think after I've been playing for a couple of years and had some kind of basic classical guitar training, I put down the guitar for a little bit. And it wasn't until my early teenage years when I think the whole grunge scene started to hit, and Metallica's Black Album, of all things, came out, that I was kind of inspired to pick the instrument up again and start to see if I could play some of it. And I remember sitting down with the tab book. So this is pre-YouTube, this is pre-internet. I think I might have had a copy of it on CD, but it might have been on tape. And in any case, I remember sitting down with this nylon string classical and spending months basically learning Metallica's Black Album from a tab book and with a hi-fi on a nylon string classical guitar. And that kind of, for me, showed me that this was something that I was really into, because trying to do that was quite hard work.
Yeah.
And then it just went from there. After that, I was hooked. I was addicted, and I started to develop my own music taste and get into different guitar heroes and people's style that I liked. And then I think that background of growing up in a house filled with music and my dad's taste of, Hendrix and Clapton and Queen and all of that started to Santana. My dad's a huge Santana fan. That started to kind of play a role in what I started to get into on guitar. I worked in guitar shops growing up. Soon after that, I started to get into the real geeky side of it. And that's where my love of kind of repairing, setting up, and trying to understand the technical side of how a guitar is put together and how it functions kind of came about, is working in guitar shops and spending time with, guitar techs and watching these. It was one particular individual who owned this music shop who really schooled me in that, and then got into gigging and it's something that is a huge part of my life and a passionate part of my life, and it's wonderful to be able to in now adult years have that ability to go out and play when we can, and also collect gear and keep learning about it. That's the thing, that there's so much to learn in terms of gear, technology, music theory, setting up instruments and collecting them. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Yeah. There's always something shiny and new, isn't there?
Oh, there always is. There always is. There always is. You can go through the criteria in a minute, but basically what you said to me is, right, it's Christmas and you got a present from Santa and you're going to get a permanent vacation to your very own desert island. I thought that does sound good, bearing in mind I am longing for a beach holiday right now. During COVID, I was like, oh, that sounds like idyllic.
Oh, me too.
A man after my own heart. You then wrote to me and said, provided will be all the food and water you need. Great. Shelter, electricity, sun cream, and endless supplies of guitar strings. Great. So the basics are covered, right?
Yeah. What else is needed?
We need to tell Santa before we go what our desert island guitar rig needs to be, and it will be there waiting for us. How tantalizing. Right. And then you gave me a list of the difficult choices we needed to make. So why don't you go through those?
Okay. So here's the choices we have to make. Guitars. We can have one electric guitar, and we can have one acoustic guitar. Effects, pedals, just what you can get on a standard size pedal train. So it's not, it could be all drive pedals, can be all whatever you want, but it's just got to be a single pedal board, right? Guitar amp can be a combo, amp head, anything, just a single guitar amp. Albums as well. There's no internet on this island. I know there's electricity and endless supplies of sun cream and stuff, but there's no internet. So no streaming services. You can take 3 albums with you, and then a wild card, which is anything music related. So it can be an accessory, it can be whatever, it can be another instrument, it could be anything.
Ariana Grande.
It could be a wild card. Yeah. So shall we start with guitars? My electric guitar would be an original 1980s Clapton signature Strat with lace sensor pickups, right, in pewter. Not that the colour matters when you're on a desert island.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
I always wanted that, like that gunmetal grey finish that he had on. It's one of the colours you can still get the Strat in now, but like when I first saw him playing a Strat in kind of that 24 Nights era, he was playing a pewter Strat, and in the 87 and 86 time, he was playing a pewter. It's just such a great colour on a Strat. But for me particularly, I prefer the sound of his lace sensor pickup guitars, you know, the pickups that didn't have any pole pieces on them. They were just, you know, flat white kind of.
I know exactly.
I've always wanted one of those. Though it's one of the guitars I still look at on eBay occasionally. And those original ones, even now when they come up, they're still going for the same price as the new ones.
Yeah.
But not only is that a guitar that I really like and I've always kind of coveted, you know, over as long as I've been a guitarist, I was thinking kind of practically as well that because it's lace sensor pickups and it's got that mid boost in it, that's a really versatile tone machine. You know, get all the Strat sounds out of it. You know, that boost and those active pickups will really help sound like humbuckers if I wanted to as well. Bit of a rock machine. So I was kind of like, that's a versatile guitar.
It's a great choice. The finish as well. I love that. I know exactly what you mean.
Electric guitars, Kiran.
Electric guitar. Okay, so the first thing that came to mind, right, when you sent me this was, okay, I'm a man that likes options and I'm a man that gets bored easily. So first thing I'm going to go for is a Line 6 Variax with the accompanying floor pedal, and literally then I will have cheated my way through this task and I will have literally got an approximation of everything. So on those days where I get bored and fancy playing sitar, it will be there at the flick of a knob, and I'll have every amp and every speaker. And as you know, I gigged this rig for quite a long time because I have a very beautiful Variax 700 and all of the accompanying Line 6 pedalboard stuff, neither of which I've played for many years now. And it wasn't because I then saw your footnote that says it can't be anything you own. I saw that later, that I then stopped myself and went, hold on a minute. You're going to a desert island. This is going to be the last electric guitar you ever have and play. Then my heart took over, right? That was my head choice. Yeah. And my heart took over and went, no. Yeah. So then it was, is it going to be a Strat or is it going to be a Les Paul? And again, I think the Strat is a beautifully versatile instrument. And I've gigged Strats way more than I've gigged Les Pauls, perhaps, potentially. But it's a Les Paul is what I've idolized and aspired to own for so many years, and even now I own a few. I still just love a Les Paul. Just there is something that inspires me to pick up the guitar and play when I see a Les Paul sitting there on a guitar stand, right? I don't know if other people have this, but I can be kind of just sitting around doing nothing, and I can just look at a Les Paul on a stand and the carved top and all of it, and I can just go, oh, I just want to play guitar. I just want to pick it up and play. It's just, it evokes so many emotions for me just looking at the thing before I even get up and pick it up and play.
I couldn't agree more.
So it has to be a Les Paul, which I think is an interesting choice, bearing in mind I love single coil sounds, and I'm a huge Stevie Ray fan and John Mayer and Clapton and all of that. But a really nice like 1960s or 59 reissue. It doesn't need to be an original, 59 or 60s for me. Something of a reissue around the 59, 60s, so late 59, 60s, where the neck profile started to slim out a little bit from the kind of earlier 59 models as they were kind of transitioning to the 60s style neck profile, but not as slim as that. A light one. I've got heavy Les Pauls and I've got weight relieved ones as well. I actually like a bit of weight relief in a Les Paul, not too much, so that it doesn't feel like a proper Les Paul. But I think there's something quite nice about a slightly more resonant weight relieved Les Paul. Either a Heritage Cherry or even a gold top. I love a gold top Les Paul. I don't own one.
Yeah, me too.
But I've been after a gold top Les Paul for a long time. It's got to be open coil humbuckers for me. I just love the look of open coil, either black or yeah. I love it. Just love. I've got Les Pauls that I've got the kind of nickel covers on, which look great. But again, for me, open coil, either black or zebra humbuckers on it. The Slash Alnico 2 Seymour Duncan pickups. They're a brilliant set of pickups, and they'll do rock brilliantly, but they're very versatile as well. But there's some great pickups out there. There's loads. I've heard a few different Seymour Duncan humbuckers. So the 57 Classics are a great pickup as well. So that would be the electric guitar of choice. Just a really nice Les Paul. It doesn't have to be a 250,000 59 original. Just a decent reissue with it. And there is so much tone potential between those pickups and tone knobs that I would be happy with that, I think.
Let's move on to albums. So I said 3 albums, right? 3 albums is hard. 5 might have been a better number, but I'm going to say my 3. And I reckon you can guess. I reckon you're not going to be surprised by 2 of them.
Right, so I reckon that you... do you want me to guess? I won't tell you what the exact album is. I'm betting somewhere on there is a Clapton album.
Of course, yes.
I have thoughts as to what the others 2 might be, but I'm not going to ruin it. I'm going to write down in front of me now, and I promise you I won't change it, but I'll write down the other 2 artists. Okay, right, I finished writing it down. All
right.
But I know there's going to be Clapton in there somewhere.
Album number 1, From the Cradle, Eric Clapton.
Great choice.
It's like the album that got me playing guitar. It's the first album that really made me think that I loved music. And still love that album now. I could still listen to that front to back every day without ever getting tired of it. Number 2, Continuum, John Mayer.
I wrote John Mayer down. I didn't know which album you'd go for, but I wrote John Mayer down as one of mine.
For a number of reasons, not just because, a huge John Mayer fan. I first listened to that in about 2007. I think it was a 2006 album. But in 2007, I probably hadn't really played guitar at all for a couple of years. And it was that album that got me back into playing guitar. So in a way, that album had the same effect on me as From the Cradle did, but later in my life kind of thing. And the last one is Abbey Road by the Beatles. It's one of the only perfect albums of just perfect songs.
They are great. They are really great choices. So I'd grown up listening to a lot of the kind of Cream Clapton stuff, and I hadn't heard of any of the kind of Blues Breakers stuff. And it was all of the kind of Journeyman era and all his more kind of pop rock kind of stuff. And I'm obviously a phenomenal guitarist. And I was going through a massive Stevie Ray period in my kind of late teenage years, and I was waxing lyrical to another friend of mine who's a guitar player, just going, Stevie Ray is the epitome of where the blues is at. He'd said, but Stevie's great, but he said he's not a patch on Clapton. And I was like, Clapton, he's amazing. He's a brilliant guitarist, but he can't play the blues like Stevie Ray. I mean, he can play the blues, but he can't play like Stevie Ray. And my friend said, have you ever heard From the Cradle? I was like, no. And so he went, do yourself a favour. And he lent it to me. He put it in my hand and he said, go home tonight and listen to this and then tell me what you think. And I called him up at like 1 a.m. I'd been listening to it all night. And I was like, I am such a fool.
What are your choices, dude?
Okay. Do you want to guess any of them? Could you guess any of them? Or artists?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe a Guns N' Roses album is in there somewhere. Stevie Ray, possibly. Go on.
You know me well. You know me well. So, top of the list is Appetite by Guns N' Roses. Appetite for Destruction. For me, it is the seminal rock album of kind of my youth, and one of the albums that just inspired me to play guitar. For me, it is just an evergreen album. I can't listen to Sweet Child of Mine anymore, or Paradise City, or any of those tracks, because I've just listened to them too much. And yet every time they come on, I still listen to them with incredible passion and just love the kind of the songs. So it's an evergreen album. I just can't get tired of it. I don't listen to it that often now, but every time it comes on, or I do listen to it, for me it's evocative of why I play guitar, the guitar's tone that I love for rock, and it's my youth. Then I might have cheated with the next one.
Is it possible to cheat choosing another one?
Well, maybe. Tell me what you think.
Don't tell me it's the greatest hits.
Well, it kind of is. It kind of is. See,
that's okay.
That's how you cheat. Well, it's not a greatest hits, but to me, it is one of the best live albums, and it's John Mayer's "Where the Light Is."
Yeah.
So it is kind of a greatest hits, but it's a greatest hits of three different parts, right? There's the acoustic set that he does on his own, first and foremost, which is just a tour de force of solo acoustic guitar playing and singing. It's just that in itself.
Neon a lot, yeah, just ridiculous.
That in itself would make for a worthy choice in this.
Yeah.
Then he does it up a notch to the kind of trio with Steve Jordan and Pino Palladino just playing some great three-piece bluesy kind of jams and great tunes. And then if that wasn't enough, after a brief interlude we get the full kind of John Mayer band and greatest hits. I think that just watching that and listening to that, and not only because of the kind of journey you go on with the songs from his career, but also just hearing those different setups of bands and things, I think is just an incredible album.
I completely agree.
Yeah, for me that ticks my John Mayer box, and it also ticks musicianship and
ticks my John Mayer box.
Who doesn't want that? This is it. This is the final choice I agonised over, and again my head kicked in and said, okay, you're going to put Stevie Ray in, you're going to put Clapton's Unplugged album in, Texas Flood or Clapton Unplugged or Queen, what's going in there, and it's agonising, right? And I settled on a really controversial one, but Michael Jackson's Thriller album.
Did not expect that. I really did not expect that, and that is such a brilliant choice. That's what an album.
Well, Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson in terms of the production. It was either that one or Off the Wall. But just listening to those two albums and the production I hear something different every time in those tracks. And I've listened to that album since I was, 6-7 years old. And every time I pick up on something different, or, a chord progression that, piques my interest, or just the way in which they've, built and layered a song. And I think it's just a great album. And there's some amazing songs on there, and it's very evocative of a period of my youth. And I think it's just a brilliant addition to those three. It gives a different mood and a different feel. Yeah, those are my three.
Choice.
Those are my three. So this week we thought it would be a good idea to have a chat about some of the things that I think every guitarist should know about guitar setup. I think there's 8 basic parts of guitar setup that every guitarist should feel comfortable doing.
Cool. So let's make a start. So 8 basic tasks.
Okay. So I'm going to try and make this fun, and rather than just make it a list.
Cool.
What I also did in kind of just a reflection of today, because a lot of this I've kind of gained as knowledge and it's become second nature to me now, is I tried to see what resources and things were available on the internet that I could direct people to say, well, look, if you want to have a read about this, have a look. Certainly websites like Stu Mac have great information on them, and some really good videos and tutorials that people can follow up on if they want to learn more about it. But what I also learned when I was prepping and kind of thinking about how to explain all of this years of knowledge to people for this podcast was there's a lot of really bad information out there on the internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I hadn't really appreciated it because it's been years since I've looked up, and read, how do you adjust the truss rod? Because I know how to do it. I've been doing it for years. Or how do you, I don't know, how do you set the intonation correctly and all those kind of things. And some of the stuff that I've been reading online over the last kind of day or two, it's just plain wrong, or just not very good advice. So,
well, don't forget, Kiran, the internet is the place where the truth goes to die. So, in all areas of life.
Well, this is true. This is true. But these are on some relatively reputable websites as well. So, you probably want to know what the 8 basic steps are.
Yeah, let's go through it. Let's work our way through your tips to guitar technical freedom.
Right. Let's see how much. See how many of these we get through. So the 8. We're going to try and at least nail the 8 today. And if we do a follow up on the intermediate and advanced stuff, then great. But step number 1, and it will be of no surprise to you. You've already mentioned it. Changing your strings. Right.
Changing the strings, yes.
Changing the strings on your guitar, which I remember when I got my first guitar, it was daunting. I didn't know where to begin with changing strings.
Yeah.
So, it might sound like an obvious and basic one and something that anybody listening to this podcast should be doing. But I can imagine there are some people that are just really not comfortable changing strings.
I still get it wrong. I'll admit to that now. There's still times for me where, actually, the last time I changed the strings on my Les Paul, I finished changing it, I got it all done, and played it for about 2 minutes, and the first string just came off at the machine head. Obviously, I think I'd either cut it too short or I'd not wound it properly. And I just thought, I actually just kind of stick the string in, leave a bit of excess so I know I can get winds on it, and then just kind of wind it on whilst keeping it under pressure with my finger, kind of thing. But I don't know what I'm doing wrong, really, if I am doing something wrong. So here's where we learn the secrets.
Let's take that then as a starting example. There is, and this will depend on the kind of how the string attaches to your particular machine head. If it's on a Les Paul style kind of tuning peg, or kind of, there's lots of different Fender style ones depending on how they kind of mount the string onto that. But let's use your Les Paul for example then, because the same principle of what I'm going to say applies to every guitar machine head in terms of how you attach a string. Figure out or learn what the locking principle is for attaching a string to your machine head. And by that, I don't mean have locking machine heads. I mean, there is a way you can wrap a string around the tuning post that will effectively lock it, so that even if the string isn't up to pitch, if you pull on it as a loose string, it will lock and it will not, come free of the tuning head. That's the first step, right? So on your Les Paul, this is going to be quite difficult to describe verbally without having a guitar to kind of illustrate to people.
It's a through post.
It's a through post. So what I would do on a Les Paul is I would obviously put the string through the tailpiece. The ball end will obviously slot into the stop tailpiece. It goes over the saddle piece there. Use that as a guide to keep it in. It doesn't matter if it pops out during this process. You can always realign it into the saddle. Obviously pull the string up the length of the neck, and then what I do is I turn the tuning peg so that the through hole on your tuning peg is at 90 degrees to the neck. All right.
Right. Okay.
If that makes sense.
So the string isn't traveling straight up through the post in one straight line. Okay. It has to turn at 90 degrees to go through the post. Okay.
Exactly right. So then guide the string along through the nut, wrap it around the inside of the tuning post so that the string then comes around and then towards the outside and then threads back through at that 90 degrees.
So do you not take the string straight through the post when you're doing? No, you put a wind on yourself first, and then
it's not even a full wind. It's probably about a half a wind, if anything, because the string is going basically through the nut, following inside the tuning post. It wraps around, and then if you imagine, we've put that tuning post at 90 degrees, the hole at 90 degrees. So the end of the string will then come back round and then thread through the outside of the tuning post through the hole. And at that point, if you pull the string, the length of the string up and lift it, it will be locked. It'll be locked in place.
Really?
Yeah. And then you can start winding.
Right. Okay.
So each tuning post is going to have its own peculiarities about how the string mounts onto it. As you said, on your machine heads, on your Les Paul, it's a through post. So that would be the way to lock it on that.
Well, my Strat isn't. My Strat is the vintage kind of Fender where you go down into the post rather than through the post. Okay.
So same principle on that one. Put the string through the saddle on your strat, it'll probably go through the trem block, up over, through the body, over the saddle. Mm-hmm. Then on the fenders, what I do for that, because again, there's a neat little trick to finding how much string length do you need, because your string is invariably going to be really long, and you've got to poke it down onto the top end, right, of the tuning post. So a little rule of thumb on those ones is take the string length, and say we're restringing the the low E. Okay. Measure up to the two tuning posts ahead from that. So to the D. Measure the length of the string to the D and cut there. All right. That'll be plenty of string length now to work with. Okay. All right. So you've then measured an appropriate length of string, because a string coming out of a packet, if you then try and poke that end into that low E tuning post and then start wrapping it around, you're going to end up with like 50 winds of string on your tuning post, right? Yeah. It's too long already. Right? And it's not, and more importantly, it's not going to lock properly before we start putting the wraps around the tuning post, because there's too much string length there to play with. And my principle is always lock that string in some way, just using the mechanics of the tuning post and the string before you then start applying your winds. Don't rely on the winds going round as the bit that keeps your string in place. So tool alert here, snips. So this is the first tool I guess we're looking at here that a guitarist should have is a pair of snips of some kind, not scissors or anything. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, I have one of these. Obviously, you can't see it, but I keep one of these, which is for people listening because nobody can see this. It's a string winder for winding my string, but it's also a cutter that'll cut my strings. That does a good job. And if you've got an acoustic, it pops out your bridge pins. Perfect. As well. Great. Yeah, there's loads of them available on Amazon or whatever. Planet Waves do a bunch. You can find loads on the internet. But absolutely, tool number one that you will need is a decent set of string snips to, in this instance, what we're talking about is cutting the strings to length. I know some people like to leave inordinate amounts of string loose once they've put it on. I'm not really a fan of that. Cut it to length. So on your Strat, once you've measured the right length of string, so you've taken the string length, you've measured two tuning posts ahead of it to get the right length of string, you've cut the string, pop it, again, adjust the tuning post so that it's at 90 degrees to the neck, pop it down into the hole and wrap it around. Again, it's not even a full wind. It's like 3/4 of a wind around the top of the post to get your first wind. But then if you've done it correctly, you'll have created a kink and a lock with the string first, so that again, if you pull, it won't come out of the tuning post. So that's the first key thing to stopping string slippage and tuning issues. Or in the extreme case, what you found on your Les Paul when you restrung it, as soon as you started tuning it, it just popped out. Yeah, and I'd had a fairly decent number of winds on it. I think what I'd done is I hadn't done that locking thing properly. And also, I think I potentially cut the excess off too close to the tuning peg afterwards. Yeah. And I think maybe it just slipped out under tension. Well, this is the thing that often happens as well. And if you've locked the string correctly, you can actually cut off all the way up to the tuning post and it won't come out when you start tuning it, because the lock is behind, where you're way behind where you're cutting. It's actually, the lock is formed at that first kink around the tuning post. So it mitigates a couple of different things. But certainly if you haven't locked it, it doesn't matter how many winds you put round there. If you end up cutting it off the excess too close, it will just slip back through and it will just ping off. So there's a handy little tip. I mean, we could spend hours talking about the different locking ways and different tuning posts, but that's not going to make for a lot of fun. So the first tip is really get yourself a decent set of string snips and figure out for your machine head, for your tuning post, what's the right way to lock the string is onto that tuning post before you even start wrapping and tuning the string up to pitch. It makes a big difference and will save you a lot of heartache down the line when you're trying to stretch in those strings and with tuning stability and things like that. How often you change your strings is kind of down to how much you can afford to change your strings and how often you play. How often you play, how often you sweat. I think that's pretty common knowledge.
Andrew Rudd, thank you very much for joining us. Are you okay?
I'm good, thanks.
Are you well?
Good.
Fantastic. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? Because we're having a bit of a conversation now about what it means to lead a band.
So the band, I guess, the original Roadrunner was started off like many 17-year-olds who love music, just wanted to make a lot of noise and be famous. And you know, I put a local ad in the Kingfisher Music in Fleet, looking for a band, and like any typical 17-year-old back then, what am I, 42 now, so fair way back. I think the ad was along the lines of guitarist, bassist, drummer wanted for Oasis, Hendrix, Clapton style band. So all genres.
Yeah, pulled those out of a bag.
Yeah.
Is that what was just on your iTunes list at the time? Well, it wouldn't have been iTunes back then, would it? It would have been like your mixtape or your CD player.
It was the typical thing that everyone was doing. Put it in, and within a few weeks, had a load of people get in touch, and we were rehearsing in Hook Scout Hut, which I managed to get for free. The acoustics were absolutely awful. Just imagine booming. Everything you played just boomed around the room. But we had a bassist called Bob Francis, who I can't remember how old. I remember thinking at the time he was very old, but he was probably my age now. So he was probably in his 40s. And then a guy called, I think it was one of the Payne brothers, the two of them, Dan. He was playing guitar, and then we had a drummer as well. I can't remember drummer. Drummer was an old guy as well who was into his rock bands. And anyway, we had a blast. It was good fun. It sounded terrible, I'm sure, if we'd recorded it. And after the rehearsal, Bob took me aside. He was in a couple of other bands, and he gave me a cassette tape, and it was Dr. Feelgood. And he said to me, "Look, I know this is your band, but I just wondered whether you want to give this a listen. This is some really good music." And at the time, really, I was aware of blues music, but never heard of Dr. Feelgood. Wasn't really tuned into that kind of genre. And he said, there's a lot of bands out there that are doing what you want to do. So Clapton, Oasis, Hendrix. He said, why don't we be a bit different? And he said, have a listen. Let me know what you think. And that's kind of how it all started.
You had the wisdom of somebody older in your band to help kind of guide you in that. When was the point when you saw that as being a beneficial thing to do? When did you realise that being a bit different, or at least being something that was more defined to the audience, when did that seem to make more sense to you? Did you gig with the new set list and you realised that it was better, or...?
I think at the start, I wasn't really sold on it. In my mind, I just wanted to play Oasis. I loved Oasis, and that was the key thing. And I'll be honest, I think I put Clapton, Hendrix in there just because that's what everyone else was doing. And
is that because you wanted to find a good guitarist, right? So you wanted
But Bob taught me a lot as a youngster. As a youngster, he really sort of passed down his experience in the bands. And eventually, there was some songs he suggested which I remember going, there's no way we're playing that and I'm singing that. I can't stand the song. I had to like the song. I had to really get it. So I think he was very patient and worked with me on finding the right stuff that I liked and was willing to take forward. And then when we gigged, I think people were dancing and having a good time. And we were getting landlords saying to us, we like you, you're a bit different to the usual covers bands we're getting. And I remember early on that kind of resonated with me and stayed with me. And I think all the way through then, all the various lineups we've had, and it was very strong, I think. And we all played a part in that. You, Kiran, Terry, Ken, when it came to new material, we really looked at what we were doing and not just doing another number that everyone does. And not only we took that genre, we took that to the next level, I think, with our lineup, which is when we started taking those songs and turning them into Roadrunner style covers, where you wouldn't hear if another band did pick it, you wouldn't hear that version because it was ours. And we turned some songs, Purple Rain, that is, I think, personally, one of my favourite Roadrunner style songs. And we were not renowned for it, weren't we?
I think the thing that that you said that I think is really, really important though for somebody starting out is this ability to listen to people that are a bit more seasoned and that have gigged a bit more and got a bit more experience. So for you as a 17-year-old kid to be able to take on that feedback or that advice from somebody else who had been out there already, had been in some bands, had been gigging, and to keep an open mind about that. I mean, one of the things that I learned fairly early on, and I'm sure most people do, is that there's no better way to get improve your musicianship than playing in a band, but also then to learn about things like band etiquette, what it takes to get a band up and running and surviving for as long as you managed to make a band work for, Andy, which was went on for decades, right? By the time I joined it was in a place where it had its own identity, and any song that we decided to do would automatically become our own in our own style, because it was a bunch of very seasoned, semi kind of professional musicians by that point. But I think that's a really insightful thing that you've kind of talked about, is at an early stage when you're setting up a band, and particularly if you're younger and you haven't been in many bands, is to keep that open mind and listen and learn from those that have done this before, because there is definitely some wisdom that comes from knowing how to put together a set list, knowing what your audience will kind of want to listen to, and also knowing how to create that band identity and define that band so it becomes something that people want to come and listen to, because it is different and it's doing something different, and more importantly that people will want to book because it kind of stands out from the everyday band that you would go and see down at your local pub on a Friday. I mean, we were fortunate enough when we were gigging with your band, Andy, to be able to play everything from pub through to kind of big audience gigs, which is brilliant. And that's because you'd created that band identity, and it was as much about putting on a show, and with all the lighting set up, with all the kind of stage presence, and to the outfits and everything like that, it was all thought through so that people knew when they went to a Roadrunner show, they knew what they were getting. They weren't just getting a bunch of guys turning up in their jeans and t-shirts on a Friday night to play through a few, tried and tested covers. It was a proper, show.
Back in the early days, how did you go about choosing a set of songs, and how is that different to later on in Roadrunner's life when you were more organised and we had it down?
So again, it's going back, I never knew any of this. This was down to Bob again. He did the set list to start off with me. He did them though. I'd present them, but he would be doing them with me. And he was all very much on time, find out, well, how long have we got? What's the typical set? And I know we'll probably come on to that in a bit. My set lists are known to go on sometimes. His at the time, so he would, okay, we're doing a 45-minute set. So he said, you've got to have, you've got to roughly guess, you should know roughly what each song, how long it takes. Add it all up, make sure you're not going over, and make sure you have a handful of numbers in case they want an encore at the end. And it was pretty basic and straightforward. I wouldn't say there was any detailed looking at the type of song and stuff. I can't remember. I think at the end, it was generally at the end, obviously, things where people are warmed up and are dancing, and you want your dancier stuff at the end, and maybe some slow stuff, sort of mid-range stuff, sort of placed sort of in between. And then as that developed, I really was... I used to love, set list on the train, commute back from work on the train, and for every gig, I used to love playing around with them, bringing in the new numbers. With us, I think another thing that made us different was we started doing intros, didn't we, for gigs, guys? Do you remember?
Yeah.
We sort of had we did Manish Boy.
Yeah, there was always 3 or 4 songs which were we knew we were going on after kind of thing.
Yeah, and that came from, look, this is quite sad, but this came from a bit of me, the dream, which was never going to happen, of, performing on the stage at the O2. And, we were going to see all these bands. I don't think I've ever shared this with you, but all these bands that we go and see, they have their own playlists playing before they go on stage, don't they? And they always have the same sort of build up to when they come on stage. And I wanted us to build this intro into Roadrunner, this kind of anticipation that people knew, hang on, that's the second song before they come on, if they're coming on soon. And then we did this jam, didn't we, around the intro to the gig, which just was fun and got us all warmed up. And then it was a case of I wanted us to have a bang. You know, Give Me Some Lovin' has been our opening number pretty much for years and years and years, as long as I can remember, right back to the start. Give Me Some Lovin' has been the number that's kicked off Roadrunner gigs. It was, you know, we are here in your face. And then, you know, we sort of, a bit of you know, a bit of your Howling Wolf, we drop it down a bit, and then, you know, maybe a couple of slow blues, then we build it a little bit just before the break. You know, you start building but you don't go too crazy, and then obviously what became a sort of moment in the first set was when Purple Rain really took off, and that's all people wanted to hear. We worked that into the last number of the first set, and that was because we obviously had then CDs that we were then selling. So
yes,
we knew that that's the song that everyone wanted the CD for. So let's put it before the break. So that's when we then sell on to that. And then we, you know, so there's a lot of thinking like that going on, not just also about the songs. And then it was a case of second set. Okay, everyone's back. They're, you know, excited for more. So we want to go fairly high tempo to start off with, but we're all equally don't want to knacker ourselves out. So, you know, sort of quite tempo again, maybe a little dip, couple of favourites in the middle. And then pretty much, I mean, after about 5 numbers into the second set, you're pretty much full pelt for us to the end. And then our encores were what? I mean, apologies.
Where is the end?
The end never came for. I know you guys sometimes were begging it to stop. I mean, my feeling around it all was we did it for the music. We love seeing everyone dancing and going crazy, and all, you know. Pubs, I always had this conversation with pubs. Yes, they're paying us for the standard set, 2 45 minutes and a 15-minute break, or 2 1 hours. Fine, that's what I agree with them. But I always say to them, and we always played on. We play an hour and a half first set, hour and a half second set, if the crowd wanted it, and we just did it for the love of it. And I always made sure we had enough numbers, and we just went on and on and on. And
some of the private gigs, some of the private gigs where there wasn't that kind of like live music curfew. I remember going on for plenty of time, and I remember on quite a few instances because we were enjoying ourselves, and we'd probably played for a couple of hours by then, way over what we'd been allocated. And you know, we had the clients kind of saying, "We'll pay you more if you play for more," and we were just like, "Don't worry, you don't need to pay us. We'll just keep playing." And we like go on from the early hours of the morning. But I remember Roadrunner being quite an interesting thing from a set list for me, because I'd always once I'd started getting into bands that were kind of disciplined and had that work ethic like you have, Andy. It was still bands that would run to a set list, and they would build a set list as you're describing, you know, with the right kind of ups and downs and dynamics to kind of please an audience. But something which I now only kind of latterly appreciate, because it was kind of quite good fun as well, was you had almost like a DJ mentality to the set list, which is a framework. And yes, there'll be certain songs that we know we're going to finish a set with, or there are certain songs that we know we're going to open a set with. But you would always be very keen, irrespective of what type of gig it was, to read the audience and anticipate their mood and what kind of particular genre they were after, or what kind of tempo they were after. And so it was not unusual. In fact, I think it was completely common for us to look to you towards the last kind of chorus of any given song to kind of figure out what was going to be the next song, because 9 times out of 10 it probably wasn't what was on the set list in front of you, because you and you know, I remember thinking for a while, I was like, this is mad. I mean, because from a guitarist point of view, right, very selfishly, because that's how obviously I look at the world, it's like, well, I need to know if I've got the right guitar, if I've got the right settings, if I've got all of this lined up. But you soon got used to it, and you appreciated the beauty of what you were doing, which was actually the most important thing, which was giving the audience what they needed when they needed it. And that meant if we had to pull a song from the, you know, 3/4 of the way through the second set and drop it into the middle of the first set, we all had to be prepared to do that at a drop of a hat and not take an inordinate amount of time to get ready to play that song, which was
I maintain that the only waste of energy that Andy ever expelled on any gig was gaffer taping up the set lists behind the speakers, because after 3 songs it was all pointless information. I sent you that video the other day of me listening to that Huey Lewis and the News song.
Yeah.
It was
you sent me a video going, check out the solo for this, and it's a great solo.
It's a song I've known for years. It's so if you're listening, go and check out the song "Back in Time" by Huey Lewis and the News. Obviously, it's from the Back to the Future soundtrack, but it's got a guitar solo in it that is just. It's just a beautiful guitar solo, melodic. It's actually a brilliant example of using the Mixolydian scale and playing over the chord changes, because it's just the chord changes are just basically D and C. Okay, so that's classic D Mixolydian, and the whole guitar solo, you actually realise as he's playing the chord notes. But regardless, it's just a great guitar. So I sat down and learned that. There's definitely parts of that solo that is new to me even after all this time. So it's something I'll assimilate, like I said, into my playing of moving between scales and moving between positions. So that's how I like to practice. I like to take things that move me and try and learn how to do them. Even if it's simple, it doesn't have to be something that's out of my reach technique-wise, just something I've not played before.
I think you mentioned something really interesting and important in there, though, because I agree with you, right? I don't generally set myself practice goals or a practice regime, but I'll be playing guitar for anywhere between 10 and 60 minutes a day if I can slot it in, right? And there'll be some days where I don't play because work's busy or whatever, and obviously with COVID at the moment we're not gigging and things like that, so it's a bit of a struggle. But the thing that you mentioned that was quite important, I think, and not to be overlooked, is if you've heard something and you think, I really want to learn that and I really want to kind of play that, great. That's a brilliant way to sit down and start practicing that particular piece or that particular excerpt that you want to learn. But what you mentioned was, and this is the bit that I need to challenge myself with more, because my theory is not at the best level, right? And I've been lazy with it over the years. But you kind of talked about the Mixolydian mode within that solo, right? If you can stretch yourself to not just learn the piece or the solo or whatever it is that you want to do to assimilate it into your playing and to get that technique and some of those licks into your kind of library, but also challenge yourself to understand some of the theory behind that piece so that you can reapply it in different positions or in different keys, or just kind of have a better understanding of why it sounds the way it does. Because then you're practicing not just kind of your finger memory around licks or, a new technique, be it, whatever's in that solo that, appeals to you technique wise to replicate. You're also then building in your theory knowledge. And that's the bit that I find a bit challenging, honestly, because I haven't got that basis of music theory, under my belt. Do you think about the music theory while you're learning these new bits or new pieces or doing that kind of practice, as you call it?
It depends. I do think it's important to have an understanding of theory, but it depends on what you want to achieve as a musician. I mean, the thing about learning guitar is that you don't need to understand theory to learn it. We both got to a point where we were proficient in our instruments before we understood anything about theory. But there's a reason why things sound good, and there's a reason why some things sound bad, right? If you play a G chord followed by a C chord, how many songs have you ever played in your life that are G, C, and D?
Hundreds.
Why is it that some chords always sound good together and some chords always sound bad together? Why is it that I can't play? Why can't I play something like A flat minor pentatonic over an E minor song? Doesn't sound right. We know what to play over certain songs and keys. We know where those scale positions are. But it does help you to understand why those things sound good and why some things sound bad, right? And I think it's good, as a musician of any instrument, if you can play it, if you can learn a little bit more about why some things sound good, then all you're doing is just arming yourself with more information. Having a better understanding of it is going to explain things you already know a little bit better, right? That's the difference. There are things that like you said, because you're bound by the shapes that you're playing. You know where on the neck to play when you're in a certain key. You don't necessarily know why all those things work. You're still going to play the same way if you learn a little bit of theory, but you're just going to understand a bit better why. And hey, sometimes, like I said, that'll creep into your playing in a way that you go, well, this should work then, right? Like, for example, did you know you could, if you're playing in an E minor, would you ever play B minor pentatonic over E minor?
No.
All the notes in B minor pentatonic are notes from the E minor scale as well. They share the same notes. So you could play B minor pentatonic, all your B minor pentatonic shapes, you can play them over E minor as well. if you want to. It's going to add in slightly different notes. You're not going to have a minor third in there. You're going to have a ninth instead. So it's going to sound a little bit more suspended. But the B is the fifth in E minor. The minor third in B is D, which is the minor seventh in E. They all fit. So having an understanding of theory allows you to sometimes go, actually, I can use this scale as well.
This is another great challenge, and I love the way that you kind of drop these on me during the course of the week. Like, it just comes as a fairly innocuous text or message, and then I read it and I go, "Oh, that's a thinker." that's going to keep me awake at night.
So this is the challenge. Okay, you've got a local wedding to do a music performance for. You've got to put a band together for it. You can choose anyone. They're going to say yes because, you know, they owe you a favour. Of course. Who do you call? And this is the kind of setup. The band, it needs to be a front man or a woman. You're going to be the guitarist, and you need to get a second guitarist. And whether you're the lead or the rhythm doesn't matter, right? Bassist, a keys player, and a drummer. Okay, so it's a standard 6-piece kind of wedding band, or 5-piece, depends. Maybe you want the front person to also be your other guitarist. Who would you want to be in this perfect covers band?
I've gone with a 6-piece lineup of exactly as you suggested, because I think that's a really nice mix for a wedding covers band in terms of drums, 2 guitarists, keys player, etc. Right? Yeah. So I think so. I've gone with that. I'll tell you the first thing that I did when I read that is I made an assumption, which is like, because this isn't just the fantasy band of all times, right? I made an assumption that these people have to be alive and able to come to the gig now, right? I actually really struggled with one particular position in the band.
Yeah.
In terms of all of the people that I like are dead. So that's going to pose a bit of a problem. Then I cheated, mate. I'm sorry. I called a friend. I phoned a friend.
I didn't say it wasn't allowed. I can let that pass. Judge rules.
You did, because I was bored while I was doing some work calls. So I thought, I wonder what the other guys think of this. So I have, and I told them I'd give them an honourable mention, so I have to now. I have a bunch of musician mates who I love dearly, and we have a little group called the Meat, Rum and Music Club, the MRM, right? Because, you know, that's the holy trinity in life, really, isn't it? So anyway, I pinged out this challenge to them, and it was brilliant. Because it validated loads of my choices that I'd already made, because I was getting the same names coming back, and these guys are uber musicians, right? So their opinion is solid, and but also it chucked in a few things that I hadn't thought of and that I'd forgotten about, a few people. So yeah, that's how I approached it.
Amazing. So yours is designed by committee. Basically, that's what you're saying.
I can see the disappointment in your face. You're like, you cheated. I tell you what, there was at least an 80% overlap between my choices and theirs. But I'll tell you where the committee kind of ruled on this one, and I went, okay. Actually, you know what? That's a solid call.
Let's start with the drummer, okay? I'll tell you who my honourable mentions are, and again, there's a dead person in here, so would be a terrible drummer now, but at the best, you know, during their peak. Jeff Porcaro is on this list as an honourable mention. Yeah. Stuart Copeland from the Police. And my other honourable mention was Steve Jordan. I found it really hard to choose who was going to be in the number one spot. But actually, I think the reason I chose the person who's in the band is because that's probably the drummer I've seen the most live, and who I think I've enjoyed the most, because he's been Clapton's drummer for some time. It's Steve Gadd.
Now, I think you've cheated there, because you've clearly picked a Clapton drummer from his kind of touring lineup. But
he wasn't the drummer during the Unplugged album, which is my thought at the time.
That's true. That's true. He wasn't. That's true. I'm a guitarist first and foremost, right? Which means this list is easy to compile in terms of guitarists for me, but it kind of forced me to think about those drummers and those bassists and you know, keys players that I really like listening to, and then kind of think, okay, would they work in a band? And I think the thing that is good for people to do if they're listening to this, right, is go and check out some of these names. Go onto Spotify, or indeed go onto Wikipedia, right? If some of these names are unfamiliar to you that we're mentioning, go onto Wikipedia and then click on their kind of discography or like back catalogue of stuff that they've played on, and you will you will know these artists based on some of the records, even if you don't recognize the names that we're mentioning, because these are incredible artists. And then, check them out on Spotify and things. And then it will improve your kind of musical ear and sensibility just beyond listening to guitarists, because then you'll start to get a feel of, what these other instrumentalists add to the sound of a mix and to a band, that and how that works with the guitarist. If you're particularly like I was for many years, just focused on listening and pulling out the guitar in a mix, this is a really useful kind of conversation maybe for people to go and find new musicians and new music that they haven't heard of, because we're coming at this almost from a guitarist point of view, but about what we kind of love about these instrumentalists. Because if we were to speak to a drummer, for example, and ask them this question, they might come up with a completely different set of names, right? Because they're looking at it very much from a drummer's perspective. Or you go and speak to a bass player and go, right, tell me who you would put in the Ultimate Covers band as a bass player. And, they're going to be names that are very different, I think, to the ones we chose. Anyway, that's a
really good point. Really good point.
A slight tangent. So, okay, mate. Well, so the first drummer that I thought of, and you'll appreciate this, was Simon Phillips, because of the whole Toto piece.
Of course.
Right? So Simon Phillips has been touring and playing with Toto for decades. And he, as a drummer, I mean, people will have heard his playing, even if they don't recognize the name. And if you don't recognize the name, it's no big issue. I mean, you probably won't even know his name unless you're a Toto fan. But as a session drummer, he is just, I mean, he's played with everybody, right? Other honorable mention, again, so this actually came from the drummer on our kind of committee group that I reached out to, right? And I must say, again, this is another one that kind of falls into the Simon Phillips type category. And that's a guy called Vinny Colaiuta. I hope I pronounced that right. And again, just incredible drummer with decades of playing behind him. Played a lot with Sting. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, probably my favourite drumming track of all time is 7 Days by Sting. Just that, it's in that 5/4, that odd meter in 5 beats per bar, and he's playing this amazing juxtaposed rhythm on the hi-hats and on the ride cymbal. It's just one of my favourite songs to listen to, purely just to listen to the drumming.
Superb drummer.
Awesome.
But my choice was Steve Jordan.
Really? Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So did you choose Steve Jordan as your final
Jordan
one?
Was Steve Gadd was my primary one. Steve Jordan was probably the closest number 2 on my list, mainly because he wasn't dead. And also Stuart Copeland. I thought Stuart Copeland's one of my other favourite drummers, but I kind of thought, is he covers band material or would he just kind of go a little bit mad?
So if you've just tuned in, guys, welcome to the Steve Lukather guitar show. This is episode 3 in the series where each week we go deeper and deeper in love with Steve Lukather. And today, joining us on the show is the world's #1 Steve Lukather fan, Damien Lodrick. So Damien, when did you dedicate a life in music to becoming more like Steve Lukather? Is that
1995.
It's fair to say he's a huge influence for you, though, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly when it was. Apart from hearing Rosanna in Africa when I was a kid, it was on like Guitar Techniques or Guitarist magazine. There was, I think it was Guitar Techniques. There was Dave's Gone Skiing from the Tambu album. That was the first time I heard this track. I was just blown away by absolutely everything on that track. Guitar playing was just amazing. The time signature, that it was interesting, the drum sounds, the bass playing, the piano solo was just mind-blowing. Everything about this
instrumental track just absolutely blew me away. And I wanted to find out more about this band called Toto that wasn't just Rosanna and Africa, which I really loved. But I didn't know they produced stuff like that. That was just eye-opening.
That's my favourite. That's my favourite Toto album, Tambu. Even just from a recording quality perspective, as an audiophile, you put that on a decent hi-fi and it's like a reference album for me. You can just set up a hi-fi to that album because every instrument is so beautifully produced on it.
Absolutely.
That you go, okay, this is a good piece of hi-fi if it's reproducing this album in the way that I want to hear it. But so Steve Lukather in a Guitar Techniques album, but was he your first kind of influence that made you want to think about devoting your life to music? How did that happen? I don't actually know that. I don't think I've ever asked you that. I've just always known you as a professional musician. When I was working in a guitar shop, I must have been 17, 18 at the time, and you were a regular customer and you knew the owner. So you'd come in and we'd hang out and we'd chat about guitars, we'd play guitar all day, and you were just, at the time, the professional musician that came in to stock up on stuff, and then you were off to a gig somewhere that day. But I don't remember, ever asking you how that became your life. I've always just known you as a professional musician. At what point did that kind of click for you and you were like, right, that's my life set now. That is what I'm going to do?
What a question. Gosh, I think I've always known that I wanted to do music ever since I was in primary school. And I started playing the piano first. So piano is my first instrument. And I didn't do very well. My piano teacher, Mr. Stevens, I must have been only about 7 or 8, said that I wouldn't amount to anything because I just wasn't interested in learning whatever it was in the music book. All I wanted to do was just explore and improvise and just make sounds. I was, and I've got an older cousin who was a massive influence on me, and only later on found out was a massive Toto fan. His influence and seeing him play Van Halen Jump on the piano, on my piano at home at the time, was just, I want to do that. I want to play that kind of piano. I didn't want to play classical piano. Those were my first influences. So I was even being influenced by Toto, but I didn't realize it at that early age. So I can't go through everything. It will take forever. It really will.
But all roads definitely lead back to Toto in some way.
Basically, yeah, absolutely. So
that's a T-shirt waiting to be printed, isn't it? All roads lead to Toto.
I got into. I was in a couple of bands at school playing keys. I was actually playing keys bass on the synthesizer. We had a school synthesizer. We had one of my friends one of my school friends who played piano, but he played it like a guitar. So he played lots of chords and sung, and I played the bass line on the synth and any synth parts that I needed to do with my right hand. And we had a drummer, and that was sort of the beginning of me just getting the bug. We would practice every Friday after school, and I just wanted to play music. That was all I wanted to do. And then that turned into a slightly bigger one where I actually learnt. This was the point when my friend said to me, right, you're going to be the bass player in the band, actually bass player. And I said, okay, I just don't know how to play the bass. So he said, here's my bass guitar, not go away and learn to play it, because he wouldn't let me borrow it. But I had to just learn to play it at rehearsals. Once a week or twice a week whenever we got together, obviously starting playing blues just with the A, D and E strings because that's all I knew. So I actually learned to play bass first, and I really got into my bass playing before playing guitar, which came a couple of years later on. So I just taught myself to play the guitar at that point with a tape player. And I remember Matt talking about this you were talking about, or Kiran was about, the
pause button and the rewinding and the
absolutely.
Trying to figure it out.
I didn't have a CD player. I only had tapes. I just remember learning Sting's version of Little Wing, the guitar solo in that is just wonderful. So that was one of the first things I learned. I couldn't really play many chords. I just wanted to play solos.
Yeah.
That was all I wanted to do.
The cool stuff.
Yeah. So I forgot what you asked me.
Well, that is what I asked you. It's like, how did you? So that's kind of where I want to go with this, right? Because I think actually when I first met you, you were in an originals band,
yes,
and you were on bass, and it was a really great originals band. I must say, I still have some of the CD that you gave me of the band, and the songs were just incredible. The female vocalist just had one of those voices that to this day is one of the nicest voices I've heard. A lot of the local musicians testify. If you want to get sharper and you need some lessons, go and see Matt. Right. So I thought, what a thing we could do on the podcast to have a day in the life of a guitar teacher, someone that has to sit in front of students all day and listen to them and have the infinite patience to coach them through some of the things that we've been talking about on the podcast over the last kind of few weeks. So welcome to the show, Matthew Lake.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Brilliant to have you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So look, it's fair to say that you are really held in high regard as a guitar teacher. And what I want to first kind of start off with is how did you know this is what you wanted to do? How did you kind of set your sights on spending a life in music?
It wasn't like a thing that I decided straight away that I wanted to do. I started playing guitar when I was about 13, and I'd played other instruments before and done the whole I didn't practice, and parents didn't want to pay for lessons if I'm not going to practice and all that stuff. And then I found this guitar in the roof of my parents' house that my mum played and gave up when she was a kid. And I found it fascinating. I genuinely thought I'd have it wrapped up in a couple of years. I thought this would be, and then the more I kind of realized that there was so much stuff involved, the more I just got into it. And then one of my first jobs was DIing potatoes at a chip shop for like £2 an hour when I was like 14. And
I misheard that. I misheard that completely when you said DIing potatoes at a chip shop. Yeah. Like, I was just like, how do you put potato into a desk?
I wasn't even allowed.
You're not using an amp for it. You're just putting the potato straight into the mixing desk. Okay,
yeah. So it was nothing to do with music, and it was like £2 an hour. So it was like a cash in hand kind of. And one of my mum's friends, a family friend, had a son who wanted to play guitar. Again, I don't think she wanted to kind of go down the road of getting a full-on teacher and paying full price. And I needed a bit of cash, and said, do you want to teach my son for £5 an hour? And I was like, well, I was only making £2 an hour. So I started doing it, got on really, and I knew this kid for a very long time anyway. He's probably only 5 years younger than me. And then one of his friends wanted lessons, and so I did that. And then it just kind of snowballed a little bit to when I went to, and this is all while I was at school. And then I finished school and carried on teaching. And I didn't really make a thing of it. Friends of friends just kept asking for lessons. And then I'd kind of help them with their GCSE performances and stuff, because that's what I did. And then I took a gap year. I went to ACM for 2 years. Then I took a gap year, and with the idea of seeing what would happen if I just carried on. And I just met a few people along the way and got some more students. And my parents were like, oh, you're quite into this. Why don't you go? And they found a City and Guilds delivering learning course, which was very uncool at the time. I did it and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And it just became one of those things where as a student, because I went on to university, I could go and work in a bar or I could teach guitar. And by that point, I was like, well, I could probably charge £10 an hour.
Yeah.
So, that's better than £4, £5 minimum wage, whatever it was at the time. So it just fitted around everything. And then I got a school when I was at university through someone I knew, and it just carried on like that. It just kept going. And I really love it. I kind of decided that I really liked it. And it was a nice way to have a normal life without having to gig. I could do all the normal things as well that I wanted to do aside from music. And it just kind of panned out like that, really. And it's just carried on, and it's just something I really love to do.
That's amazing. So where are you at now in your kind of teaching profession? So you teach for schools, you have private pupils as well, right? So how often are you teaching in any given week?
So in in term time, I'm at school. I teach in 3 different schools, two junior schools, and one's a senior / sixth form college. So that takes up to about 3 o'clock every day from 7:38 in the morning. And then I teach. I've probably got about 20 private students at the moment that I fit in after school. So yeah, all day, every day. And then obviously in the holidays, some school students want to carry on, and some people go on holiday, and you just kind of, it's a bit more flexible in the holidays. But yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment. Just teaching a lot, actually. But
and you've always, I the thing that I love speaking to you about is you have a real passion for your instrument. I mean, you're an incredible 6-string guitar player as well as bass player. And you've always just come across as someone that just really loves their instrument and really loves music, and you know, your theory knowledge is superb as well, and you're a gigging musician. So you know, what an incredible, you know, mix to have of all of those kind of different facets, to be teaching, to be helping people, you know, get better at guitar, but also be out there as a gigging musician and playing all the time and making a living from it, man. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love it. My aim, I guess, when I always kind of knew when I started to look at colleges at school, I kind of knew that music was the thing. And at the time, we went to lots of colleges looking at sound stuff, because I don't know why, but at the time, lots of people were saying to me, that's where the living is, you know, learn the tech side of things. And we went to ACM to their open day, and I just walked into the guitar room and I was like, yeah, I'm not into sound. I just, you know, I mean, I am into sound in the sense from if a guitar makes it, but I don't want to sit there for hours EQing a snare drum. Do you know what I mean? I want to play the guitar. Not there's anything wrong with that, but it's just not my thing, you know.
No, it's torture.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I remember my dad saying to me, you know, I don't know how this is going to go, but if this is what you want to do, then you should probably try and do something with it. And my aim has always been to just play and teach, make a living out of music. I didn't have anything particular that I was like, I'm aiming for this. My aim was just wouldn't it be nice to get to 65, 70 and look back at a life of guitar playing? And that's,
oh yeah,
you know, that's kind of what I wanted.
I've always kind of said to myself, you know, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Well, yeah. And like, you know, there are times when it is a job, you know, like anyone else's jobs. That, you know, when you have like at school particularly, you have to write reports, do parents' evenings, and do perform, and it's all good stuff. But like sometimes you'll get the odd week where, but Christmas is the killer, because you get every school wants to do a Christmas performance, so you're involved, which is great. But also you've got gigs, Christmas gigs, tend to be writing reports at the same time. So you get kind of like, you end up with like 2 weeks before they break up of like, just, you don't go to bed. Well, I don't. I just end up going, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and I've got to be here and I've got to be there. And, you know, and also obviously none of the schools are related to each other. So you have to manage that time on your own, you know, and schools, they're not overly worried about what the other school is doing. They you know, they don't want you to kind of, you can't be in 2 places at once. But yeah, so it's it can get pretty, but then you kind of sit back and go, well, yeah, if I had 2 busy weeks, solid weeks, and all I did was play guitar and help people play guitar, and that's not much to moan about at all, really.
That's really cool. I was going to say, you are one of the hardest working musicians I personally know, and how full your days are. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about how, you know, you've adapted during COVID and the kind of lockdowns. And I know you've just kept yourself incredibly busy and grown your business in that way. But I'm not going to feel too sorry for you, because even though as hard as you work, you still have like the coolest job that I envy so much, which is you get to do your passion every day, man, and you get to work really hard, and you do work phenomenally hard. And you do it with a guitar in your hand 80% of the time, and I just love that. I tell people about you in my kind of professional career, which is very different to what we do on the podcast, about somebody that kind of set his mind on something that he wanted to achieve and do and make a career out of, and you've absolutely kind of epitomized that. And you're a very busy man.
Yeah, it's good. It's really cool. I just love guitar in any shape or form, really. So I've got no issue with sitting with a 7-year-old learning a D chord. Last night I was teaching a guy the jump solo, and that was really cool as well.
That's really great.
So it's like you get all, and it makes you. I don't know what other guitar teachers feel like, but I've definitely got better because of it. Because sometimes you get someone say, "I really want to learn this crazy metal song that's in like drop B and it's like impossibly difficult. And you think, well, okay, so how am I going to do that? And then you'll find that there's nowhere online that's got sheet music tabs. So you're there going, right, I've got to work this out, or work out the main riff So it's quite good. It pushes you.
Keeps you sharp. You sharp. Absolutely. I think in any walk of life, right? And we've spoken about this on the podcast before, like one of the ways to get better is to put yourself into situations and play with other musicians where, they keep you sharp and they keep you learning. So, and you're talking about that from a teaching perspective, it's kind of keeping you sharp by having to learn stuff that you wouldn't necessarily normally learn. And, So what does the most rewarding kind of student look like for you? You've spoken about two extremes there, right? It's just, teaching a 7-year-old a D chord versus teaching somebody an Eddie Van Halen solo. What gives you the most kind of rewarding feedback from teaching somebody?
Obviously, it's like as teaching the more advanced stuff is fun because when you have a student who, especially one you've taught for a while, so you've seen the journey from, the guy I was teaching last night, he's 18. I started teaching him when he was 11 and he's really gone through all the stages, not doing a lot, then doing all the stuff that I didn't ask him to do, then do it, and now we've covered it all. And that's really rewarding to look back and go, oh, that's a really nice journey that we've been on. And we have a nice relationship. And, what's also really nice about that kind of thing is, I can see me ringing him up, asking him to come and dep in, once he's got a driver license and he's been to uni and, if he wants, I'll be asking him if he wants some gigs, So that's a really cool thing. And then, but I also really love it when the penny drops with anything with kids, like kids or adults, or when they've been struggling to, change from C to G. They do it and you're like, yes, well done. You've broken down one barrier. Let's carry on. I find the whole thing quite rewarding. And even when you get people that don't really know what they want from it or why they're doing it, or they find it really difficult and they're in a rut, it's rewarding to kind of help them break it down, look at it differently. Most of the time it's looking at things a different way, I think. You have to sometimes approach things in more than one way to find out how you best learn. So
I think you have to help people get out of their own way sometimes, don't you?
Yeah. And sometimes people think that people really want to be able to do this and the goal is too big. It's not that it shouldn't be a goal. It's just that this goal has 5 subsections that you have to get through. But anyone who's just given it a good old go and, like you say, getting out their own way sometimes, listening to what I have to say and challenging me sometimes. I've got a student who goes out of his way to find me examples of people doing things differently to how I said he should do them. And I love it. Because it always sparks a conversation of like, so, yeah, okay. That's a good example. Mark Knopfler. Well, he never used a plectrum. So it's all good for me not to use a plectrum. Yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, of course. It's totally cool. But, do you want to only be able to play like Mark Knopfler? Or do you want to develop your own thing? So learn both, but it's quite cool. And I find that really rewarding as well, just because it's like, right, you're challenging me here and we're going to find a way for you to see that, if you can skin the cat in all sorts of different ways, you're going to be a more versatile guitarist in the long run,
Yeah, that's cool. What was it like getting presented that award virtually by Joe Bonamassa?
Man, it was such a huge thing for me. Like, Joe has been a huge influence on me. In fact, arguably, he's been the biggest influence on me. I've met him a bunch of times. He's a super lovely guy and super smart guy, and he's a total nerd. He really is, and just talk about anything and everything with him, guitar related and things like that. He's been a huge influence on me, and he's actually the reason why I wanted to be a professional musician with my life. After I saw him at the Royal Albert Hall in 2009, after that gig, I stood up and turned to my parents, and I was just like, "This is what I want to do. I want to do this for a living, and I want to play here eventually one day if I have the opportunity, like at the Royal Albert Hall." And just like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And like, I was just about to I was young enough that I was about to start thinking about college and things like that, and further education, things like that. I just finished my GCSEs, I think it was around that time. And I said to them, I don't want to do normal college. I don't think that's for me. I want to go to music college and kind of actually properly further my musical abilities as best I can. So yeah, I really do owe a lot to Joe, and to have him present this award, even like virtually, I'm just like, this is someone else, man.
That's surreal, right?
It's definitely one of those things that's going to stay with me forever. Like I said, I've met him a bunch of times before, and he's always been really generous to me, but it's just something really symbolic to me that he did that. And I was just, I'm eternally thankful to him, and obviously eternally thankful to UK Blues Federation, and of course everyone who voted for me. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I really am.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations again. I mean,
thank you.
That's a great story, man. I mean, starting with the Royal Albert Hall gig and then coming around to now, it's almost like a full circle in a way, isn't it? And
yeah,
at least it will be if you play the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, that'll be a gig to do where I'm like, if I did the gig, I'd be like, okay, I could quite happily call it quits now because I've done the thing that I was like to set out to do. I won't, but but yeah, it's that's like a bucket list kind of thing for me, and
absolutely,
yeah, it's just mad. It's been a few days now, and I'm still kind of like pinching myself every now and again. It's like, it did happen, didn't it? I'm just yeah, it did happen.
Yeah, it must be quite surreal.
Yeah, definitely is.
But it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened by accident, right? You've grafted. I mean, you've really dedicated yourself to kind of your art, especially with like going and studying as the first part of it, but then really kind of applying yourself and getting out there and gigging and writing as well. I mean, the quality of some of these songs is absolutely. I was just saying to other Matt before you joined the call. I mean, some of these songs, they're earworms, man. They are in my head. I woke up like this morning, like singing like Soul Breaker in my head, and I just dropped that's a great track, man. And then I was driving my car to the garage to go and get some work done on it today. And I don't know if you guys get this, but when you're particularly like into a tune while you're driving and the guitar face thing starts to happen and you're really enjoying it, you're digging it, right? You're laughing. So I'm guessing you get this. So I'm driving along like 60 or 70 and I'm like, whoa, that is a solo, man.
I just imagine like people driving past the other way, looking at you, looking weird. Goes, what the hell's going on in that car?
What's wrong with it? Has he been stung in the face by a wasp?
Is there like a gas leak or something like that? Is he smelling something weird? I don't know.
It's probably a wasp in his car or something. Like that.
That's it. But that's my thing. That's when I know. That's when I know I'm digging something because that inadvertent thing. I was just this is, and you can hear the Bonamassa influence for sure, but you've got your own style as well with it and your own tone, which and hey, look, it's never a bad thing to have a bit of Bonamassa playing in your lick library.
I think it's especially common with guitarists nowadays is that they always should, and they do, wear their influences on their sleeve and not try and hide who they're influenced by, because there's a lot of people who are like they feel like it's I'm influenced by this guy, but I don't want people to know about it because they think I'm like copying his style or things like that. I'm like, no, it's not a case of that. It is definitely a case of you have to be influenced by someone, and that you will, instinctively take on some characteristics from them. So it's because there's obviously something that gravitated you towards that person and their style of playing, and it definitely was for Joe. I love all his playing and things like that. But I'm the same with people like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I'm like, I freaking love his playing and how he goes about playing things and things like that. So it really is just like a melting pot of musical influences for every guitarist and musician in general.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely a thing you should be proud of and wear on your sleeve a lot more.
I don't think people do that. Right? People get bashful. They're like, well, I'm just, because I think there's this thing, right, where people want to try and create their own sound. And they want to be individualistic. But that doesn't necessarily happen, right? Yeah, that doesn't happen by accident. It happens by assimilating things into a melting pot, generally.
Exactly. I absolutely get that you want to find your own sound, which is obviously like the guitar player's dream, is to be the absolute pinnacle dream is to play one note and everyone knows who you are. It's like the BB King thing. Everyone knows BB King from one note. Yeah. Or or at least like 1 second. So even if you play a million notes in that 1 second, you know who it's going to be. Like, Yngwie Malmsteen, you know who he is instantly. Exactly. From you just hear like an excessive amount of notes and overly wide vibrato, but it sounds awesome.
It's like the fury.
Yeah, exactly. So it literally is just like you want to convey yourself in the shortest amount of time possible, and everyone knows who you are, kind of thing. That's like the ideal dream.
And I like the fact that some guitarists also kind of wear their influences on their sleeves, because it becomes a gateway for other people to find out about those influences.
Exactly,
I remember when I was learning guitar, for me, the album that got me playing blues was From the Cradle, Eric Clapton.
Early
90s. And
for me, that is kind of Clapton's pinnacle blues playing sound. But when you go back and, I mean, on that album, you got things like Toe Down, which is a Freddie King song. Yeah, and you go back and listen to the Freddie King playing and you go, oh, I can hear all that Clapton stuff. It's not Clapton stuff, it's Freddie King stuff. And you start realizing how much these players that you enjoy listening to are wearing those influences on the sleeves, but it still sounds like them.
Yeah, and they can sometimes open up doors to other players, like you say. Like you went back and listened to Freddie King, and because like I said, every player is a melting pot of influences, and like
that's right.
You see, like take I know we mentioned him a lot, but take Bonamassa for instance. He's like hugely influenced by people like Clapton, B.B. King, Jeff Beck, Stevie Ray Vaughan, lots of people. And Eric Johnson, people like that, and that's exactly. I actually found. I think it was Eric Johnson. I think I found Eric Johnson through Bonamassa because everyone's like, oh yeah, I can hear a lot of Eric Johnson style of playing. It's like, oh really? I'll go and have a listen. And it's like, yeah, and then I found Eric Johnson. I freaking love Eric Johnson now. So it's like, it's it can really lead you to other things, and that's why I'm always open about who I'm influenced by. And I understand why people are like kind of tentative about being, because it's a bit of a, I don't know, like you say, they're trying to be their individual selves, which is totally fine. I totally get that as well. But also, you got to respect where you come from, man. It's like
absolutely, yeah,
and carry that mantle forward, especially for somebody like you who, as Matt said, you will be on the Albert Hall stage one day. I've got no doubt, right? I've got no doubt. But, it will be really, that's that carrying that thing forward, right? As in the way that Bonamassa's doing it for the people that influenced him, and Clapton did it for the way that people influenced him. It's it's nice to have that legacy that kind of transcends,
absolutely,
different generations, so that, you get these new guitarists being inspired by, what came before them, and then putting their own stamp on it and moving it that
absolutely,
forward,
100% agree with that.
Which is cool.
It's cool, isn't it? Because I guess Bonamassa always wanted to play at the Albert Hall because of he loved that Cream Farewell album with Clapton and Cream playing at the Royal Albert Hall, and then he's managed to make his dream happen. And it's almost like, you want to be part of that ongoing kind of process of influence and achievement, and influence and achievement. And it's cool,
absolutely.
I like it.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that.
So there's this last year of lockdown, end of 2020, you released Exile, Live in Lockdown, which was your live album with Catfish. One of the things I wanted to ask about is, obviously the pandemic ruined everyone's plans for touring live music. Was this live album born out of a need to be creative in lockdown, or did you always have a live album on the cards?
We always wanted to do a live album, and we've been talking about that for a while, and maybe that was going to be the next thing we released, because we play the songs on the albums differently live, like they're slower or they're faster, or they'll tend to be structurally similar, but they'll be, obviously on the album you take some liberties and try and find some interesting sounds and things like that. So you try and find some weird things, so then when you do it live you have to try and find a way around it with what you got, because I played like mandolin and things like that on some of the Broken Man stuff, and I'm just like, I'm not bringing a mandolin to every gig. I can barely play it anyway. So things like that. So you just find like a different way of doing it. So it was a way that we wanted. It was something that we wanted to do, was do a live album, because we felt like the live versions of the songs had something different, and we always prefer playing live to being in the studio anyway. So it was definitely something we wanted to do. It wasn't this layout wasn't exactly how we planned it being, with it being in lockdown. Basically how it came about was there was a festival out in Holland that we had played before. In fact, actually the previous year we had played it it was called Blues Maastricht in Maastricht, Holland. And they had seen Dad and I, Paul and I, doing acoustic duo live streams like from our home. And we've been doing a few of them every now and again for different venues, different festivals, things like that. And they really enjoyed it, and they wanted us to do something similar for them, but with a full band, like a live stream, but with the full band. So they helped us. We found a venue, and they were like, "Yep, we'll monetize it so you can afford the venue hire, and we'll get a video crew in and things like that." We didn't make any money from it, but it was a fun thing to do. It was really good to do. And I love that festival as well. So I'll happily do that as well. And that was the first time we had played together in 5 months, and we decided not to do any rehearsal, purely because it wasn't a smart idea, because obviously you can't really be in confined spaces with each other, but also because we wanted to get the first notes that we play on the live stream to be the first notes that we've played in 5 months. so everyone kind of sees the energy that you get from that. I mean, we'd done like a little run through beforehand to obviously test the gear and things like that, but that was like us performing properly for the first time in 5 months. And it went really well. Like, it was all like, I hate to use the phrase, but it was like, it's like riding a bike. You kind of remembered how it goes and things like that. And we, obviously, because it was a live stream and they were filming it and things like that, they had all the audio and the video for it, obviously set up and recorded. So we listened to it back and I was like, yeah, there is a certain energy about this and a certain sound that it's got going for it. And we really liked it. And we decided to turn it into a live album and a live DVD. Like I said, because you had all the audio footage there. And it came out of something that we had no idea what to expect, because there was no one there except for the video crew. So there's no audience. So doing a live album with no audience was definitely not something that I had planned on doing. Maybe it might have happened. You never know. We could plan to do a live album at this venue and then just no one shows up.
And then no one shows up. But it's been a while since that's happened, I'm sure.
You never know. Yeah, absolutely never know. So it's
like that.
It's like, I'm going to record. This is going to be the next big thing. Just no one shows up. But yeah, like I said, it was just the energy of it that we had. And I think it's definitely a unique thing. I don't think we would do another live album until it's a proper live album now. Because I want to keep this one kind of like unique kind of sounding thing for us. I know obviously a lot of people are kind of doing similar thing now, but it's a big thing for us now, and we're proud of how it came out, and it was definitely a unexpected surprise at how it turned out. So it's very, very fun.
So let me get this right. So that live album, Exile Live in Lockdown, that recording, each song is the first take of the first time you guys had played together for 5 months.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say there are a few songs in there.
Wow. It's astounding, isn't it?
But I will say there was a few songs on there that were not on the actual gig live stream because a gig is different to an album. You got a different flow to it. Things like that. So we did record this is a full disclosure thing. Maybe it's ruining behind the scenes kind of.
No, don't worry.
So we did record I think it was like 2 of the songs weren't actually in the gig, so we recorded them afterwards, but we did do them in one take.
Yeah.
Or as beforehand, either or. But it was all done in one take because obviously, we only had a certain amount of time, so we didn't want to keep doing songs over and over again. It was all one take, which for me is a big thing, because when I record, I take forever to record.
Dude, that's a really humble kind of volunteering that information.
That's the thing. I'm definitely way more comfortable on the stage than I am in the studio. Yeah. I don't know, I just get like red light fever all the time, and it's.
And I do as well. Yeah. And I see. Matt and I have recorded a few times and gigged. Matt Oliver and I gigged plenty of times. And I totally get that as well. Like live, it's like there's nothing. It's just like tranquil peace, and just I'm in the zone. And in the studio, I just don't know what it is. It's just that kind of pressure of. And I think you can practice your way out of that just by kind of getting familiar with it and trying to ignore it.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience thing. Yeah, I think it's a completely different environment for me. So everyone's really surprised when I say that, but it's like it's not the same thing. Like it's like a gig. You're there. There's hundreds of people in front of you potentially, and it's like you're being paid to be there. And if you make a mistake, you're never going to hear that again. It's like that's right. You never have to listen to that again. It's like that's it. That's done. Never going to hear it again. Unless you, for some reason, go and listen to yourself on YouTube and people's iPhone footage of you, but that's something you can easily avoid. Whereas in the studio, it's like you have to get it right, and you're paying to be there. You're on a strict budget, and someone's there is employed to be there, to kind of do this. And it's usually very comfortable as well. Usually the sound engineers that we work with are lovely, and the spaces that we work in are lovely things. But it's just like there's still like an underlying thing for me where it's like I have to get this right, because otherwise, if you record it, you're going to hear that mistake over and over and over and over again. I'm like a lot of guitar players. I'm a very self-critical person when it comes to my own playing. I think it's a natural thing for anyone in the creative industry, and it's like you're always kind of critical of your own work more so than anyone else would be. Like I'll be like, that was kind of out of tune, and there's a bit of I didn't quite play that right there. Literally, no one else is going to notice, and it's like, or maybe if they do, they don't care. And it's like, so it's definitely a self-inflicted kind of thing. But yeah, it's I always whenever I'm recording, I do tend to take multiple takes of like solos and things like that because I want to get it right. I want to get the right kind of thing. And you know, I'm not one to be like, oh yeah, I do my solos in one take and it's all live in the studio and things like that. I don't care. I just want it to sound good. You know, it's like that's the thing for me. I just want it to sound as best as I can make it. And like if that does happen to me meticulously doing it over and over again and kind of slowly losing my mind, then that's how I do it.
Well, I guess it's kind of like that with if you do a live gig, obviously if you do make a mistake or if it's not as good as the last gig, there's always another gig to go and kind of put that right. But if you're doing an album, at some point you have to commit it to tape and say that is it. So it is harder to let go of it, isn't it? You can always say, I'll have one more go at it. You know? Exactly.
Like there's always one more take, and usually the annoying thing is that the best take was the second take that you did, and now you're on like the 46th take, and it's like, okay, maybe I should have stopped. But that's exactly right. And also with albums, you know, this is all going to be stuff that you haven't played live yet, because obviously you don't want to, everyone hear your music and record all the footage first before you have it on your album.
That's right.
My dad and I have a saying where it's like, ideally, you'd actually want to record the album at the end of the tour, because then you've played it a whole bunch of times and you know how it goes, and also you might find some new things that you find live that you want to put into it. So ideally you want to do it at the end of the tour, but obviously the idea of a tour is to promote the album. So it's not a very smart move, but it's like ideally if you want to get the perfect sound, you do it at the end of the tour. But like I said, everyone's going to film it on their phones.